Hello, everybody, and welcome to the free intro to the Magdalene Heart Path online course. I'm Mercedes Kirkel. I am the one who leads the course, and I'm so glad that you're here, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to start by muting everyone. So I'm going to, okay, so now I've put everybody on mute, but there will be parts later where you'll have a chance to participate, and then you can just unmute yourself when you are wanting to join in and speak. But by muting, it helps the recording quality and the whole meeting quality to be better. So that's why I start with that. So here's what I'd like to do today. The Magdalene Heart Path online course is starting. The actual recordings are going to be available this week that people listen to, and then the first coaching call is going to be next Saturday. And so what I want to do is begin by talking about what we do in the course, kind of give an overview of the course. And then I'm going to give people an opportunity to share your situation, and I will, whoever volunteers, I will work with you to show you the process relative to the situation that you're offering. And I found that that is the best way to really get a feeling for what this is and what we're talking about. So we'll be doing that a little bit later. So what I want to do is switch my screen here, and well, I'm not going to do that yet. I'll start out with talking about how this course came about. This course is based on the book Mary Magdalene Beckons, which I'm the author of. It was a book that I channeled from Mary Magdalene with amazing, amazing teaching that she's giving about our spiritual growth at this time. And the real core of the book is about how we need to strengthen our feminine, all of us, whether we're male or female. We all have our feminine part, our feminine side, and how that, for most of us, has been way underdeveloped and is holding us back spiritually. And so what most people need more than anything else right now for our spiritual growth is developing our feminine side. And what that will do is it will allow us to live in our heart. And that is something that most people want. Most people who are in touch with their spirituality and on a spiritual path of growth are very aware of the importance of living in the heart. And most of us are aware that we are able to do it sometimes, but maybe not all the time, not as consistently as we would like. And Mary says the reason for that is because we haven't laid the foundation relative to our feminine development. And that foundation has three primary arenas. It has to do with our being fulfilled and complete relative to our relationship to our body, our energy, which includes our sexuality, and our emotions. And she says when those three things are mature, when we've done our work and we're really have completed, our growth in those areas, then we are naturally able to make the shift into living in our heart. And then other shifts happen from there. And one of the biggest ones is that our what she calls the lower mind, which is our thinking mind as well as our subconscious, that it relaxes and becomes in service to the heart, and that allows our higher mind to open up and to actually become in union with our heart. And that is the inner union of the masculine and feminine. Well, for all of that to happen, this foundation needs to be in place. And she says for most of us, we're not there. And the biggest area that we're lagging behind in for most of us, and the one that she says would make the biggest difference for all of us, is our relationship to our emotions, and especially what happens when we feel emotional pain. And what she talks about is that most of us have learned or been trained to avoid our emotions, that emotions are or emotional pain at any rate. You know, when we feel anger, sorrow, fear, that the thing to do is to try to get out of it as soon as possible, and better, never feel it in the first place. And she says that that's actually not the case relative to our feminine. That what is the case is that all emotions, including painful emotions, are given to us to help us. They're showing us that we've gotten disconnected from ourselves and really disconnected from the divine part of us, some divine part of ourselves. And not only are the emotions signaling that, they're also giving us very clear guidance about how to get reconnected if we understand how to make use of them. And she says that's what most people don't understand. And that was her primary teaching that she gave in the book, Mary Magdalene Beckons, which was how to do this, how to use emotions to reconnect with whatever divine aspect of ourselves we've gotten disconnected from. And in that, the painful emotion resolves. And that's the beneficial way to respond to emotions, that really supports us and helps us. And if we're on a path of spiritual growth, the one that's going to make the biggest difference for the most people in terms of really letting us grow into our next stage. She says that many people today are really aware that the feminine becoming strong is important, but they don't really know the practical steps of what they need to do for that to happen. So now she's really giving the practical steps, which I love. So this is the core teaching that she gave in the first book. And what I found when I was working with people in private sessions is that people would say to me, "Oh, I just love that teaching. It was so incredible. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mary, for bringing it forward." But then when I would be working with them around some situation in their life, and I would be asking them to implement that teaching, to make use of it for responding to that situation, I found that people didn't know how to do it. They didn't know how to make the bridge from hearing her teaching and really feeling like, yes, this is really great, this is valuable and an important path, but how to bridge from that to how do I do it? How do I actually make it happen in my life? And of course, if we can't do that, it's not going to make a difference. So out of that, I decided to create this course. And this course is taking all the teaching that Mary gave in Mary Magdalene Beckons and breaking it down step by step and really guiding people in how they implement it and how they apply it to their own life. And I have found that when people take this course, it really works. Now people can really do the process, make it their own, and people have found it to be very transformative, to really make a difference. And so I love this course. I love sharing it with people because I value this process so much, and it's wonderful for me to watch as other people really start to get it and start to see how they can use it in their life and really have it make a difference for them. So now what I want to do is I want to go to a video page. So if you give me just a minute here, I am going to click on a page. This is a page from my website. And what I want to show here is, this is the page, this is the mercedeskirkel.com website, and you'll see at the top it's where it says courses, and then this is the first one where it says Magdalene Heart Path Online Course. And it's giving kind of an outline of the course, and that's what I wanted to go over, the various topics that we're going to be covering in the course. The first week we work with blame and judgments. This is another one of those areas where most people who are on the spiritual path are in touch with the fact that a lot of us have the tendency to make judgments, and that part of the spiritual path is to stop making judgments, that that's supportive of our spirituality. But most people don't know how to do it. And most people have found that it's not enough to just have the desire to stop judging, that in fact, that isn't sufficient. And one of the reasons is because whenever you put your attention on something, you tend to reinforce it. So if your intention is to stop judging, you're putting your attention on judgments, that tends to reinforce the judgment. So it's kind of a non-productive cycle. And what Mary says is, rather than focusing on the judgment or focusing on our thinking mind at all, we don't need to do that. Instead, we need to focus on what is being overshadowed by the judgments, by our thinking mind. And so in the first week of the course, we do focus on judgments because many people don't realize how insidious the process of judging is for most of us in our consciousness. And so what we're really focusing on in this week is what is a judgment. And we learn that we're actually engaged in judgmental thinking much more than most of us realize. And that's helpful because that awareness can help us to recognize, okay, if we're doing that, we have another choice. We can do something else. And that's what we start to get into in the second week, where it says your body, emotion, pathway to God. And this is the beginning where Mary says the other choice is, instead of going into your mind and judging, which is putting your focus on the external of what's out there, what's right and wrong with what's happening out there. Instead of that, she says, our other option is to become aware of ourselves and what's going on with us. And specifically, one of the most effective and also efficient ways to do that is to start to tune into our body and our emotions and to become aware of what's going on with our body and our emotions. And a lot of us don't tend to consistently be tuned into that. And for some of us, we may not be aware of what's going on with our body and especially our emotions. A lot of us, unfortunately, received the training, especially in our earlier years, to separate from our emotions, to not act out certain emotions, and even some of the training was to, not have those emotions. So don't be sad, don't be fearful, don't be angry, those kinds of things. And out of that, we learn how to suppress our emotions. So this step is really important for a lot of people because it's the process of reconnecting with your emotions if you've been trained at all to suppress them and to recognize what emotions are. It's not the same thing as acting out emotions. This is just being aware that you have them and letting yourself experience the emotion in its pure form. Then the third week, what we go into is what's underneath the emotion. And this is what's really different about Mary's teaching. She says that whenever we're having an emotion, it's telling us that something is going on with some deeper aspect of ourselves that she calls our inner divinity. And it actually tells us not only that something's going on, but it tells us what's going on with our inner divinity, which part of our inner divinity is being affected by the circumstance. And so our emotions are this very important tool that connects us with our inner divinity if you understand the process that Mary's teaching. And so it becomes a very powerful pathway into being strong and whole in what Mary's calling our inner divinity. So that's what we work with on the third week. Then on the fourth week, the topic is become a co-creator. This one we're working with, okay, once we've gone inside and really identified what's going on with us and attended to something, if we've gotten disconnected from some aspect of our own inner divinity, we've attended to that and gotten reconnected, so we're whole in ourselves and strong in our connection to God. Once we've all done all that, then what? She says there's another step, and that's coming back out into the world, that it's not enough just to be in your inner world connected to God, that we all are beings that are involved in our outer world, for most of us right now in the third dimensional world. And so the fourth week, what we're looking at is the step of how do we bring our inner divinity back out into the world and become a co-creator, where we're not just a victim, we're not just at the effect of the world, and we're also not cutting off and separating ourselves from the world. We're interacting as a whole, strong, divine being with the world. So that to me is a very fun part of the process, because that's where we get to be very creative, and I always enjoy that. The fifth week is titled Source Your Natural Compassion, and in this week, what we're working with is how to connect with the inner divinity in other people. So beyond just connecting with our own inner divinity, once we learn this process and become strong with connecting in ourselves, we also have the ability then to start to reflect, to connect, to tune into other people's divinity, and to support them in being strong and connected to their divinity. So this is an outgrowth of the idea of being a co-creator, that we're not independent. We're not just doing this for ourselves. We're also doing this to become connected to the divinity in all, as well as including other people that we're interacting with. And then the sixth week is our integration week, where we're putting this all together. And how does this work in kind of a flow of, being with ourselves, being with other people, connecting with our inner divinity, connecting with the divinity of others, and doing that dance in life of living from our heart. The other thing that is going to be included in the class, which is why it's a 7-week class, is that 1 week we take a week off, and it's after the 4th session, and I do private sessions with people that week. And I found this to be really helpful also, where I can really work privately with each person, and we can take some situation from their life and apply the process to it. And that seems to make a real difference also in helping people to get coaching for each of the steps of the process and help with whatever they need help to, again, integrate this and make it their own. So all in all, this is there are 6 weeks of teaching and then 1 week of private session. And for each of the teaching weeks, there's a 1-hour recorded presentation that you listen to on your own time. It's available for the whole week, and you just need to listen to it sometime before the coaching call on Saturday. I do recommend listening to it as early in the week as possible, because then you can be practicing and be working with on your own the ideas that are presented, and you'll probably get more out of the coaching call the more time you spend working with the ideas. And then on Saturday we have a 90-minute group coaching session where we practice that part of the process for that week and go over what was covered in the recorded session with practical life situations. And then, as I said before, the final thing is there's a 1-hour private coaching session with me where you work on getting personal guidance for mastering the skills. So this is coming up, and doesn't have the dates here, but the dates are that the first coaching class is going to be next Saturday, and it's at hello, I'm back. So that's Saturday, October 29th at noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. And that, again, will be a group coaching call, our first of 6. So that's the overview of the class. I wanted to briefly see if anyone has any questions. If you have any questions about anything I just presented, I invite you to unmute yourself, and I'm happy to hear your question. So is there anybody who wants to ask a question about any of that? Okay, I'm not hearing any questions. So I'm going to go on, but if you have questions later, I welcome you to ask your questions later as well. So what I want to shift now into is working with a real life situation. And we'll do as many as we have time for. And the situations that I've found are easiest to apply this process to, and you'll see the process most clearly, are one of two situations. One is if you have a situation where you find yourself having a lot of judgments come up. That's a situation we could work with. Or the other one is if you have a situation that's stimulating some kind of emotional pain for you, bringing up anger or sadness or fear or frustration, difficulty, anything you're struggling with in your life. Those are good situations too. And I do ask that it be a situation that you're comfortable sharing. We are recording this, so something that, you know, is you're comfortable other people hearing about your situation. So, is there anyone who has a situation that you are open to sharing with the group and that we could do some practice with? And if so, go ahead and unmute yourself and let me know. Anybody have something that they would like to practice with? You get a little free coaching. And it doesn't have to be a huge situation. It can be something, you know, ordinary, small, whatever. It's just something where either you have something that stimulated judgments for you or something that you're struggling with that's challenging for you in some way. Anybody feel moved to share? Okay. Well, what I can do is I can give an example and start out with an example. And then if somebody would like to share something of a real life situation, we can go into that. I do encourage you, though, to listen to bring up some situation from your life, because that's where you'll see the process most alive. And that's where you'll start to understand how this is valuable and very likely different from other processes that you may be familiar with. So be thinking about something that you'd like to work with. But I'll start with an example, and it's a really simple example. I like to start with this in introductions because it is so simple, and it's something that I think many people are familiar with. And that is a driving example where you're driving on the road and somebody cuts in front of you and you feel irritated or annoyed because of that. And this is what I mean about how when I say it can be a small situation, you might consider that, oh, well, that's not a big deal. That happens all the time. But from Mary's point of view, anything that stimulates emotion in us is significant. And that that what she's recommending is that we get to a place where we don't see anything as small or unimportant. It's all contributing to us being fully connected to life and to God. And if anything is stimulating some kind of painful emotion, which annoyance or aggravation is a kind of a painful emotion. It's showing us that we're not fully connected in that moment and how to reconnect. So it's valuable, it's important. Even if it was just a moment, it's valuable. So we're going to start with this moment when someone cuts you off. So I'm going to start with possible reactions we might have. The first reaction might be to go into judgment, where we start judging the other driver. That was a really stupid thing to do. You know, this person ought to learn how to drive or whatever, where we're making the other person wrong. That can be a very common reaction, especially if that's our habit, is to go into our mind when something happens that's painful for us. And that's actually a really key indication of our connection to our feminine, is when something comes up that's painful for us, what's our first response? If our first response is to go into our mind and to judge, that's a sign that we're probably disconnected from our feminine. Similarly, if our first response is to fix it, that is generally a sign that we're also disconnected from our feminine. Now, in this particular situation, it might be good to fix it because you might have an accident if you didn't do that. So just in this particular situation, you might want to go in to fix it and then deal with the emotions that are coming up. But in most situations where you're not driving and it's not something that could be a life or death situation, it's not necessary to immediately go into fix-it mode. But many of us have developed that as a pattern to avoid our feelings. So these are two of the big patterns that people use to avoid feelings, going into judgment or going into fix-it. So let's say that you are choosing to do something else in this moment, or if you had to do something to fix it, you did whatever you needed to do to take care of yourself, and now you're going back into the process. So you want to do something different other than going into judgment and projecting your awareness to the other party, the other driver, and what's wrong with them, or trying to fix the situation. Now you're in a space where you're ready to really do something different. Well, another thing that some of us have been trained to do who have a spiritual orientation is we've been trained to disconnect from the situation in a spiritual way. We've been trained to disconnect by, oh, I'm just going to stay calm and peaceful. I'm not going to let this make me lose my center, make me lose my connection to myself. So it's what I might call a masculine override, where you're just going to have a practice or a certain discipline, and you're going to use your discipline, and you're not going to be affected or do your best to not be affected by what happened. That is a different process than what Mary is recommending. She's recommending that you actually let yourself have the experience, and have the experience of whatever the feeling was. So in this situation, a lot of times most of us don't realize what we're feeling because we're so used to doing something else, blaming the other person or fixing it, or going into our spiritual programming to just stay calm no matter what. But if we didn't do that, if we were just in touch with our feeling, I'm guessing there would be two feelings that you would be having. Well, the first feeling, I would say, would probably be aggravation, annoyance. And that's actually a type of anger. You might call it mild anger, a certain flavor of anger. And anger is interesting because anger is one of the emotions that we can have that indicates, it's what I call a hybrid emotion. It's a mixture of emotion and judgment. So when we're in anger, there's usually judgment woven in with the feelings. So our next step is to separate out the judgment so we can get to the pure feeling. And the way we do that is by identifying the judgment. So the judgment when you're annoyed with somebody cutting you off is usually something along the lines of, they shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. That was, that some level of whether they don't know how to drive, or that was a stupid thing to do, or what were they thinking, or something like that. But underneath that is some level of, they did the wrong thing. They shouldn't have done that. So that's a type of judgment. Whenever we're saying something is right or wrong, or that somebody should or shouldn't do something, we're judging. So what we do with this process is we identify the judgment. Okay, I'm having that judgment. The judgment is they shouldn't have done that. And then I set it to the side so I can separate it out and get to the real feeling that's underneath. When I set that judgment aside and I go back to what I'm feeling, it changes into something else. The anger, or in this case, annoyance, aggravation, will, once you separate out the judgment, it will shift into a different feeling. And in this case, the feeling for me, and I think for many people, would be fear. That's really the pure feeling that comes up when somebody cuts you off. It's fear. Some level of fear. But we're so used to going into these other things, of adding on these other things, we don't tend to be fully in touch with it. But when you do this process, it will take you to, I felt afraid when that person cut in front of me, or you might say cut me off. So Mary says, open to the fear. Let yourself fully feel it. And even to the point of merging with it. And this is, for many of us, counterintuitive to what we've been trained. We've been trained to get away from the fear. Fear is bad. Fear is going to hurt us somehow. But she's saying, no, fear is actually, like all emotions, it's going to help us if we know how to make use of it. So she says, let yourself open to the fear. That in and of itself is a different experience for most people. Most of us don't have a lot of practice with opening to fear. Even that can seem very scary. But she's saying it's safe to do it. In fact, she says the thing that's most likely to hurt us is to avoid the fear, because then we won't get the gift that the fear is giving us. So we open to it to the point of actually merging with the fear. Then the next step is to find out what's underneath the fear, inside of us. That's the true source of the fear. And this is very important. She's saying the source of the fear is not what happened out there. It's not the person who cut you off in traffic. They didn't make you afraid. What actually happened is the person who cut you off in traffic, or that incident of having somebody cut right in front of you, shocked you. And in that shock, you disconnected from your own connection to your inner divinity. And when that happened, the fear arose to let you know that you were disconnected from your inner divinity. And that's why the fear was there. So she said you were affected by the outside incident, but it's not that the outside incident made you afraid. The outside incident shocked you to disconnecting from this part of yourself, and out of that disconnection, that's where the fear came from. So now we can do the reverse process. We can take the fear to find out what part of myself did I disconnect from. And she says this will always be some aspect of your inner divinity, and it's always a beautiful part of yourself. It's a part of your God self. So in this case, when I follow the pathway, and in the course I teach more how to do this, but I'm just going to go right to it now. I would say that the part of my inner divine the inner divine quality, the part of my inner divinity that I cut off from is my sense of safety. And there's probably a second one too. And this maybe goes back to the original annoyance, which is, if I go back to the original annoyance and separate it out from the judgments, there's probably a secondary feeling there of frustration. And that frustration, I would say, is connected to an inner divine quality of wanting cooperation. Cooperation with other drivers on the road. So now we've distilled this down to feeling afraid because you need safety, and feeling frustrated because you want cooperation. And at this point, what Mary says is the emotions have done their work. They've guided you to the part of your inner divinity that you got cut off from, the part of you that longs for and knows what it's like to have safety and to have cooperation. And she says, what's more, you have become aware of that inner divinity, and in that awareness alone, that awareness is enough to reconnect you to the parts that you got disconnected from. And if you want to reinforce that reconnection, you can give yourself a little space of time to just be with safety, cooperation, and where those live inside of you in their wholeness, what it's like to really have safety, to really have cooperation. And she says we all know what it's like to have that, because we can't miss something that we don't know what it is to have it. And she says, all of these parts of ourselves are really fulfilled in God. Our true safety, our ultimate safety, is in God. It's not in the world. It's with God. And similarly, in cooperation, our fullest experience, realization of cooperation is really with God. It's not in the world. And this is how we know that fullness, is through our knowingness of God, our connection to God, that gives us this reality that we can tap into. So, through doing this, we reconnect. And in that reconnection, we become whole again. Once we're whole, those feelings dissolve. They resolve, really. We don't need them anymore. We're not feeling cut off from those parts. And when I work with people using this process, and I ask them when they make this reconnection, when I ask them how do they feel now, there's one word that I always hear again and again and again, and that word is peace. That they feel peaceful. When you return to your wholeness with yourself and with your inner divinity, and really it's your wholeness in God, you have come back to peace, and you know what it is to be peaceful again. And then there's the final step, which is, now that you have taken care of yourself, you've come back to your wholeness, is there anything else you need to do? And this is the step where we go back into the outer circumstance. Is there anything else we need to do? Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes all we needed to do was just reconnect with our wholeness and come back to our peace and our fullness in God. In this driving situation, that's very likely the case. If we were to do this process, the other car's probably not in our vicinity anymore. They're gone, and we're safe, and we're back to our wholeness, and then we're ready to carry on. But in many circumstances, there actually is something that you will choose to initiate, some change with yourself or a request for change with others. And And that's really important to complete the process, because we want to bring this fully into life, fully into our world. But in this case, we're making this change from a different place than where we started and maybe had that impulse just to fix it. Now we're making this change not from being cut off, figuratively in this case, but also literally cut off from our inner divinity. We're making this change from our wholeness, from a place of peace, from a place of God connection. And that's going to be very different. It's going to feel very different. And very often, we're going to have a whole different set of creative ideas come up of what things we might want to bring into life to implement to support us in maintaining this wholeness, this connection to our God self. So that's an example of the process with a lot of explanation from me. And I hope that was helpful for people. So now what I would love to do, again, is to do a real life situation. If there's anyone who is willing to offer a real life situation. And it can't be something, like I said, as simple as I was driving yesterday and somebody cut in front of me and I felt really annoyed. It can be as simple as that, or it can be something much bigger, more important. Any of those will work and will give a feeling for how this process works when we apply it in real life. So is there anyone who has a situation who would be willing to share it and we can do some practice with it? If so, please unmute yourself and let me know that you have a situation.
Ladies, can you hear me?
I can. Who is this?
It's Roseanne.
Oh, hi.
It happened a few weeks ago. I was told by one or two ladies that to meet them at a restaurant at a certain time, and then after we were going to hear a speaker and see a film.
Uh-huh.
And I said, okay, what time? And like I had things back to back, but I went. It was across town, so I went at actually a few minutes early and set the table up, told the waitress, and an hour later, no show. And I ordered and ate, and then I went to the second thing. And there I met them. There was three of them. Mm-hmm. And they told me they decided the last minute in the car to go somewhere else for lunch. And I go, wait a minute, why didn't you call me? And why would you decide the last minute without, you knew I was going to be there and waiting. And she always had comebacks that they did the right thing for themselves. And I felt really disappointed and felt a grown woman. I was starting to judge them. Grown women should not treat other women that way. I mean, I had other plans too, but I got there early. The waitress said to me when she noticed no one showed, how rude they are to just leave you and not call you or anything, because I kept checking my phone. But at the second event, they were defending themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't have closure with them. And then I kept getting emails blaming me because I expressed how I felt. I was very disappointed. And that's what I got into because my body felt that way. But right now I'm thinking, is there another underlying feeling that I'm not getting attached to?
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your sharing, and I appreciate your inquiry and wanting to explore this further. So I'm hearing that there were kind of two moments in this situation. The first moment was, when they didn't arrive at the restaurant and you ended up eating by yourself. And the second moment was when you met up with them at the meeting and you heard their you asked them, what happened, and you heard their responses. So what I'd like to do is pick one or the other of these that you think has stronger, is connected, brought up stronger feelings for you, or right now has stronger feelings when you think of it. Is it that was it the first thing of just, them not showing up, or was it the second thing of their response when you asked them why they didn't show up?
The response.
Yeah, I kind of guessed that that's what it was, but I wanted to make sure that that was the truth for you. Okay, so let's work with that. And this is the first thing, is it's really helpful to notice whenever there's some kind of situation, there's one moment where you really get triggered or stimulated. And lots of times it's not so easy to identify that moment because it's surrounded by all these other moments where there's a certain level of triggering too. But when you notice the feelings you're having, the feeling will help you identify the moment. Because the moment before, you didn't have that feeling, and then that moment and after, from then on, you did. And that's one of the tools you can use to identify what's the real moment where I have the biggest charge here. So we're going to use that, what I'm calling a moment. Of course, it took more than a moment, but that slice of time where you heard their responses, as that was the real triggering part. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay. So I heard you already say, I started to have judgments come up. And that's great. Great in the sense that you're having the awareness of that process, because that's the beginning of change. It's very hard to change until you become aware of something. So what I'd like to do, and I need to get a pen to do this. Excuse me just a minute. Okay. What I want to do is I would like to write down what the judgments were that came up when you heard their responses. So you said one already, something about grown women, something.
Rudeness and grown women behaving that way.
Grown women shouldn't behave this way.
Yeah. And they're all from a certain church, that that teaches them different ways of looking at things, being more kind and considerate.
Okay, so maybe another one was
a big one is I would never do that to someone. I would never last minute change plans and leave someone hanging. I would be more considerate. Maybe I feel like maybe that is the strongest thing. Gosh, I would never do that to you.
Okay. And I think the church one was something like, they should practice what the church teaches about kindness and all that, right? Something like that. Is that what? Yeah,
because now that's what they're throwing back at me. I wasn't kind because I spoke how I was feeling.
Oh, so they're not being kind. Was that your judgment?
On their part, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the ones that I'm hearing. Is they're rude, grown women shouldn't behave that way, I would never do that, I would be more considerate, they're not being kind, they should practice what their church preaches.
Yeah, that's good. But how
okay.
How am I feeling about it? I keep going back to that.
Right. We'll get to that in just a minute. But it's very hard to know how you're feeling when it's mixed in with judgment. Most of us have such strong minds. We've developed our minds to such an extent that it overpowers our feeling. So then we work with that, and we bring the judgment, the part of the mind that's masking the feeling in this, we bring it to consciousness by just the process we just did, identifying the judgments. So now what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to take these judgments, that list we just read, and set it to the side, just for now. You don't have to get rid of them. You don't have to do anything to them other than just set them to the side. And if you do that, see if there's other feelings that come up for you in response to their response that they made to you?
I feel very disappointed.
Okay, great. Disappointed. Anything else? Or does that pretty much sum it up?
Well, that's why I tuned into you now, because I don't feel anything else except that. I don't feel anger. I don't want it to happen again to me, but yet I want to stay open to other friendships. So
Let me ask you a question, and feel free to say no. Don't try to make it fit if it's not a fit. Just quick, easy yes or no. Did you also feel hurt?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, great.
I was trying to understand it, truthfully. You know what I mean? I was trying to understand.
I'm trying to understand it. In this situation, I would say it's probably a fix-it strategy.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
So
you're right.
we're
It's masculine too.
it's a way of coping. If I can understand it, then maybe it won't hurt so much and I'll know how to deal with it.
Right. Okay, so I was hurt. I was hurt.
You're hurt. Okay. See how those strategies, those other things we've learned tend to mask feeling? And we need to set them aside oftentimes in order to get to just the pure feeling. So what I've heard so far is disappointed and hurt. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I want to give you just a moment to let yourself just sink into the pure feeling of that moment when they responded to you. Just really give yourself a chance to merge with your feelings, to open to them fully of disappointment and hurt. And you don't have to do anything about them, just experience the feelings for just a moment. And people who are listening, you can do this too. You can imagine what this situation was and open to the feelings also as a way of practicing. And when you feel like you really let yourself do that, to open to the feelings and let them in, let me know.
Okay, I've been working on this, so yes.
Okay, wonderful. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take one feeling at a time, because oftentimes when you have more than one feeling, each feeling is pointing to a different aspect of your inner divinity that you got disconnected from. So that's why it's important to flesh out all the feelings so that we can get to all the parts of ourselves that we want to reconnect with. So let's start out with disappointment. Why don't you tell me just a sentence or so about, what did you feel disappointed about? Or if this disappointment could speak, what would it say?
The plans that I made to get there and be there, and that a no-show. I don't want to go into judgment, but again, disappointment in that women would do that.
Okay.
A so-called friendship,
Okay. So, it sounds like sometimes judgments can also help point us to what part of our inner divinity didn't get fulfilled by that, because the judgment will be the opposite. So in the judgment that you just stated about, friends shouldn't do that, I'm imagining that the part of your inner divinity that wasn't fulfilled by this was friendship.
Yes.
Okay, great. That sounds really clear to me that you felt disappointed because you were needing friendship. Is that right?
I don't know. I don't know about that word need, but I'm open to friendship.
Okay, well, let me say it a different way. When you think about their response to you, you felt disappointed because it didn't fulfill your inner sense of friendship.
Yes, that's good.
Okay, great. So let's rest with that for a moment and go to the other feeling of hurt. And if the hurt could speak, what would it say?
It was a strong feeling, I suppose. I wasn't angry, I don't think, but
Yeah.
hurt is, well, why would someone do this to me? I don't know how else to say it. Like, hurt,
What were you needing that you weren't getting?
Oh, that particular time, I wanted to share, like have a sharing moment with other women, and we were doing two nice things together, and that sharing moment, that heart-to-heart moment, or
Okay.
I did not get.
I think that goes with the disappointment.
Okay.
I think that's friendship and sharing. You were disappointed that you didn't get the friendship and sharing that you wanted.
Yeah, I don't.
But the hurt, I think, was something different.
Something different, huh?
Mm-hmm. Can I make a guess?
Sure.
I'm wondering, and again, feel free to say no if this isn't a fit and you don't have to explain it, just no problem. But I'm wondering if the hurt was because you were needing to matter.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, in their decision. I did say that.
And their what?
In their decision to change.
Yeah, yeah.
I just said, how could you just leave me, So I guess I felt like I didn't matter.
Yeah, you needed to matter.
Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you were disappointed because you wanted friendship and sharing, and you were hurt because you needed to matter.
Yes.
All right. So now what I want to do is just focus on those inner divine quality parts of friendship, sharing, and mattering. And I want you to go inside and find a place in you that knows what it's like to really have that, to have the kind of friendship and sharing and being treated like you matter that you long for.
Yeah.
And just rest in that for a moment. Give yourself that experience of what it's like to really be fulfilled in that.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And when you do that, what's the feeling that comes up for you with feeling the fullness of that now?
I feel real peaceful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. There's that word again, peace. And that's a sign to me that you've reconnected.
Yay.
And you see, the connection was in you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And that gives you the power to be whole. You have the key. You have the power. It's in you.
So all I need to do is feel that feeling and then go into what I was.
The source of the feeling. That
Yes.
some part of your connection to your inner divinity that you've gotten cut off from.
Cut off from.
Disconnected from. And if you take the course, it'll get a lot easier to do that because there's actual practices for strengthening that, and you'll start to understand. Right now it might seem like, well, I hope I can do that, but I'm not sure how to get there. And that's what the Course helps you with. With the Course, you'll know exactly how to get there.
Yeah, I am reading your book slowly, and
wonderful. So now I want to do one last piece with this, and that is from this place of being reconnected to your friend, your wholeness of friendship, sharing, and mattering. Okay? You stay connected to that?
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
I want you to stay as connected as you're able to that. And now bring in that situation of the response that those three people made to you, and see if you can hold both at the same time. Your connection to these parts of your divinity, friendship, sharing, and mattering, and that experience. See if you can hold both.
I keep going towards the peacefulness. I keep going towards that way. And I see the three women, and they were more angry than me. But I see them, but it doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter what they think or what they did. Or
Is it a sense of freedom?
Yes.
Yes. And I'm wondering also, is there some greater sense of compassion for them too, and what they were going through?
Oh, wow, that's big. I just read that chapter on forgiveness last night. Sure, I'm capable of doing that, yes.
Okay, what I'm hearing is not really in this moment, but that may come.
Yeah.
That's fine. I don't want it to be a should, like, oh, you should be. No.
You know, I don't want to feel that way, like I should or have to do it right now. You know?
Right. And what oftentimes is, there's a process that happens here where if we've been in a situation for a long time, and I don't mean a situation, in a pattern for a long time, a pattern where we tend to feel like other people are affecting us and, you know, we're at the effect of them. If we've been in that pattern for a long time and we suddenly have an experience like this where you feel free, that's really important. And that may be something you really need to integrate. And that'll be, you know, your next step of growth is growing into, I'm free. I can stay connected to my own divinity, even in the midst of things that, yes, they're painful. Yes, I wouldn't choose to have someone treat me this way, but even if they do, I can stay connected. But eventually you'll get to a place where that freedom will lead you to free attention, where you actually become curious, well, what was going on with them anyway? Because this is obviously, if I'm free and I'm happy, then it's really about them. So I wonder what was going on with them. And that's where the compassion starts to come from.
Oh, I see.
But it's a process. And so I want to support people in letting that occur organically, because if you try to make it happen, you're going to go back into your head and be.
Yeah, I was trying to make it happen, and that's where I was when I tuned into you. Right now, I go, why am I thinking of how they're feeling?
Right. So I encourage you to just have this experience, and for me, I'm celebrating. This is a celebration I'm feeling for me of seeing the shift in you from where you started and where you've come to. I feel really happy.
Thank you. Thank you. I do too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mercedes. I appreciate it very much.
Okay.
Should I unmute you or mute you up again? Or?
Why don't you mute yourself? Right. Thanks. So I think that was a really good demonstration, a really clear demonstration of the process, and I really thank you. I thank the woman who shared very much. So I'm wondering if there's anyone else who would like to do a little practice with some situation that you experienced and still has some charge for you, either charge in the form of judgments coming up or in the form of feelings coming up. Anyone have a situation they'd like to practice with? Anyone else? Going once, going twice. Okay, well, maybe we'll rest with that, and I'm really glad that we had that example to work with. And so what I want to go into now is talking about the course again. And first I'll start just checking in, are there any other questions? Not necessarily, you know, doing practice with a real life experience, but do you have any questions that came up, either about the last sharing or about the process? Anyone want to ask anything? Okay, well, if you do have questions, feel free to unmute yourself, and I'm happy to take the questions. So what I want to do is go from here and show you how you can sign up, because I really hope you will choose to sign up for this course. Like I said, I found it to be so valuable for people. And you'll read some of the testimonials about people saying it's life-changing, or it's the most powerful spiritual course they've taken, because this is really getting to work that most other processes are not going into. And it is what Mary says will move us forward faster than anything else. I have certainly found that to be the case in my life. So I'm going to go back into bringing up my, I thought I was going to go back into it. Well, give me just a moment. I have to call up this, call up the website. So excuse me just a moment here. There we go. Okay, now I can share this with everyone. Okay, so here's how you sign up for the course. I'm going to go back to the home page. Here's the home page for mercedeskirkel.com. With your cursor, you could go to the courses tab, and then this first one says Magdalene Heart Path Online Course. You can register there. At the very bottom, it'll say click here for the course dates, and you click on that, and it actually has it takes you to a registration page. It has all the dates and all the information, and also a button where you can register. Or the other thing you can do that's even easier, you can go over to the calendar page right here, and you click on it, and right at the top it says the Magdalene Heart Path Online Course, Living from Your Heart, and you scroll down. Here's some of the testimonials. No other online spiritual growth course has been so clear and practical for me. I experienced huge breakthroughs back into my heart and received answers to questions I've been asking for a long time. Each session has been incredibly powerful for me. I recommend this course especially for people wanting to discover how emotions can connect to our divinity. I would like to live my life in this way. Those are some of the wonderful testimonials I've received. So at the very bottom here, the second one, it says to register for the course, click here. You click on that, and it will take you to this registration page. And you scroll down to the bottom of the registration page, register for the course now, and that's how you do it, is by signing up there. Also, for everyone who signed up for this free webinar today, I'm also sending you an email that you're going to receive soon, and that'll have a link for registration. So that'll be another way, is you can just look for that email and use that link and sign up. So I hope to see all of you in the class. As I said, the recording for the first week is going to be available later today, so you can start listening right now. And then next Saturday at the same time, noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, we'll be having the first online coaching session. And I hope you all will join me. So one last time I'll ask and just check in, see any last questions before we say goodbye for now. If so, unmute yourself and I'm happy to take a question or more questions. Okay, well then, I will say goodbye. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this has been valuable for you, and I hope you sign up for the course and I get to have more time with you. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.